May I just remind you that this is a hybrid session, and in terms of the joint rules, it is acceptable. And the fact that the president will be on the virtual platform. Honorable members, I now call on the Speaker, the Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Malibongwe.
Mandibulele kakhulu kuwe somlomo wendlu National Assembly Speaker, Honorable Chair of the NCOP, His Excellency the President Tata Ramaphosa, His Excellency Deputy President Tata Mabuza, honorable members of this august house. Abemi bonke belizwe lakowethu ndiyabulisa ngale njikalanga. Ongasekhoyo uPresident uNelson Mandela, uMadiba, uNkosi uDalibhunga, ehleli kude kwele mimoya, usijongile namhlanje sikwiliholo lesixeko. Ezi zakhiwo zesixeko kulapho othula khona intetho yakhe yokuqala emva kokuba ekhululwe etolongweni iminyaka engama-32 njengommi okhululekileyo kumakhamandela abacinezeli norhulumente wegcuntswana bephethwe okwamakhoboka. Elinani ke lingu-32 years akathetha ngalo apha linentsingiselo ephuhlileyo nebalulekileyo kwimeko esizifumana sikuziyo. The number 32 symbolizes freedom and creative expressions, a number that embodies teamwork and optimism. It is within that spirit that we should execute our task. Somlomo, namhlanje sizifumana sicukene kwesisixeko sikweliholo ngenxa yesithwakumbe esithe sehla sokutsha kweParlamente. Ndiqinisekile into yoba uNkosi uDalibhunga uMadiba usijonge ngamehlo anodano nomphefumlo odandathekileyo kuba isakhiwo sabantu apho umgaqo siseko waze waphuhliswa waphehlelelwa khona sintunyekwe saluthuthu. Ukutshiswa kwezindlu zowiso-mthetho zethu sisenyeliso nesithuko esingcolisa idemokrasi yeli lizwe. Somlomo, it was in that house that now lie in ruins that we passed progressive and numerous legislation to ensure that schooling is compulsory for all children as their birthright, especially children from the poor families. It was in that house that we passed legislation to guarantee all South Africans health services and a social protection to the poor. The Parliament, as a tribune of the people, is critical in attaining the developmental goals of our nation. Noxa kubuhlungu kuxhaxha umsebenzi wona weParlament awuzukuma, umsebenzi remains on track in the service of the people. Our gathering here today is an important reminder that our democratic institutions are not just defined by brick and mortar, but by the work they do and by the confidence the people have in institutions of democracy. Ewe ke kambe akulahlwa mbeleko ngakufelwa. Standing here today is proof that we will not be deterred by the burning of the Parliament building. Honorable Speaker, abo ke bayivuyelayo beyibhiyozela into yokutsha kweParlamente zizaphuselani ezingalinakanga elilizwe nekamva lethu. Thina singabemi sizakukhusela elilizwe lethu kofunze weni abalitsalela emva. Abanye benu baza kuquqa apha kweliqonga kwezintsuku zimbini besithi akukho nto yenziweyo. Ayizukusiphazamisa ke lonto, ingazukusisusa kwindlela esikuyo yokwakha elilizwe. Utata uMandela ubehloko esithundeza esithi xa uqabela intaba wazi wafika encothoyini yazi into yoba ziseninzi indaba ozaziqabela phambi kwakho kufuneka ke uqabele. Somlomo, le ntetho yesizwe yenziwe ngumongameli ngoLwesine wale veki iphelileyo ibhentsisa ngokunyanisekileyo indima ehanjwe ngurhulumente we-ANC kunye nemingeni esidibene nayo. Abantu bazayiqonda into yoba asifihli makhuba kulinywa. Esi siyeleko sokutshiswa kweParlamente yethu sifika sisakhwankqiswe kukuntunywekwa kwezakhiwo ukubiwa kwempahla kunyanga kaJulayi kulonyaka uphelileyo kwiphondo laKwaZulu Natal nelaseGauteng. Kwadodobaliswa konakaliswa iziseko, kwadodobaliswa uqoqosho, kwashiyeka izijwili, kwabhuqa inxele likakhetsekile. Siyayinyevulela ke lemikhuba mibi kangaka yobholela ecaleni. Honorable Speaker, the State of the Nation address for the ANC reflects an honest account on progress and challenges on what needs to be done. It was an action-oriented State of the Nation address which is time-bound on implementation. Despite the destruction of KZN in KZN and Gauteng, our government, working with the people of these communities, restored all social services timeously. We thank all South Africans who displayed their patriotism through helping to restore dignity and normalcy. It is through our collective efforts as a nation that we will be able to defeat all attempts to undermine our democratic order. The commitment by the President to strengthen our security cluster and address its capacity deficiencies as well as capabilities is critical and must be commended. Somlomo, our biggest challenge as a country is to address the legacy of injustice of the past, where we remain unresolved in increasing unemployment, deepening poverty, and widening inequality. Siyayinquma indima esele ithathiwe ngurhulumente ekubuyiseleni uzinzo kunye nenkonzo kulamaphondo omabini. Lonto ke ibonisa ukuba urhulumente xa esebenza nabantu kungenziwa lukhulu. Owona mngeni sijongene nawe ngoku kukugqiba lomzila wengcinezelo, ukulwa indlala egqibileyo kubantu bakowethu, ukungalingani kunye nokunqaba kwemisebenzi. Umongameli uhlabe umkhosi esithi masimanyane senze isifungo sendibano kazwelonke ukuze sibe sisizwe sinamandla. Ibalulekile ke lonto ukuba okufunwa ngabantu yimisebenzi ebonakalayo, okufunwa ngabantu yimisebenzi esisigcina. Oyena ndoqo kwesisivumelwano yinsebenziswano, kufuneka ke sivumelane ngayo kwenza inguqu kwezoqoqosho kweli lizwe lakowethu khona ukuze bonke abantu balo baxhamle kulo. Honorable Speaker, as the ANC, you are fully behind the bold economic moves by government announced last week. As part of this plan, we have undertaken several economic reforms in areas such as energy security, the efficiency of our ports, digital migration, access to broadband, and ease of doing business. Recognizing that it will take time for business to recover from the pandemic and begin to create jobs again, government implemented the presidential employment stimulus, which in the first phase created more than 850,000 employment and livelihood support opportunities. We therefore continue to support government's decision to implement public employment program in support of unemployed working age adults. This will be done in consultation with organized labor and other social partners as part of the social compact. Building on the achievements of 2021 Sona, this Sona has expressed itself on 50,000 young people that will be recruited for the National Youth Services and 10,000 unemployed TVET graduates that will be placed. Somlomo bekekileyo siyawamkela amanyathelo angqingqwa apapashiweyo okulwa nendlala esiwabonayo kuba ayakhawulelana nengxaki ezenziwe ngulobhubhane we-COVID-19 kunye nodushelwa ngoJulayi. Esi sibonelelo se-350 siyambile indima ekubeni sincede kumakhaya abeweswele kakhulu, apho kuye kwaqhamla 9.5 million yolutsha kunye namakhaya ayi-5 million apho bokukho intlupheko kakhulu. The 350 social relief of distress is meant to assist unemployed between the age of 18 and 59 as they do not receive social protection income. It is important that those who are beneficiaries of this grant must use it to provide for the little that they can in their homes, for traveling, for food, for communication costs, as well as to update their CVs as they will be knocking on various areas trying to get jobs. Kubalulekile ke into yoba ndike ndiyichaze into yoba phaya ngelixesha silungiselela uvoto phaya eKomani uba uyazijonga iposi ayikho kude nendawo ethengisa utywala abantu baphuma eposini neza 350 babheke kwindawo yotywala xa ubuza into yoba kanti ekhaya kuzawutyiwa ntoni na athi hayi imali yengozi le imali yengozi ayingena endlini ufuna kuyifumana uyitye uyigqibele kwakule ndawo so ayiyo mali yengozi ke le mayivunyelwe le mali iphinde ekhaya khona ukuze kube khona into etyiwayo esi sibonelelo ke senzelwe side senza abantu bacula ingoma ngelixesha lika December bathi uRamaphosa uyamthanda umahlalela uvela mniki 350 into yoba leyo ndlu ingavumi into yoba sicule ngaba ndiyakuculela somlomo ngoba into yoba uyivanga le ngoma uvela mniki 350. It is critical that we infuse a vigorous pace of agility in our economic reconstruction and recovery plan for the DA. Honorable Sena, through you, Speaker. The claim that we plagiarized their manifesto in the president's plan is an overreach. It's an overreach. For a party that believes in market fundamentalism and sees no meaningful interventions by the state, it is reach to claim such wisdom. Our economic perspectives are fundamentally different with the DA. We believe in the need for government to create an enabling environment for business to flourish, not some hostile takeover. Similarly, we disagree with the EFF with the EFF's flawed approach. The partnership with the private sector ought to be enhanced to ensure the efficient provision of service delivery. This is fundamental reason why we have always been proponents of black economic empowerment with the ultimate aim of ensuring job creation so that the economy truly benefits the majority of this country's historically disadvantaged citizens. Unlike the right-wing Freedom Front Plus and its liberal DA, who do not support the empowerment of black people, no wonder no black African leader lasts in a leadership position in the DA. Government alone cannot address rising unemployment, and we support call by the president for the private sector to increase productivity, investments in particular in those sectors of the economy which creates jobs. Kungoko siluxhasa ikhwelo likamongameli elithi amashishini abucala mawasondele ukuze sonke sakhe elilizwe siyayibethelela intetho kamongameli esithi urhulumente xa esebenza yedwa akana ukwazi ujongana nomcelimngeni ingakumbi lo wengqesho. Somlomo, the formation of the African National Congress was based on addressing the land question. The wars of resistance fought by our forebears were against land dispossession. Futhi ke ANC sifuna ukuyibeka icace into yokuba sithi umhlaba mawubuyele ebantwini abantsundu. Abasisininzi selilizwe sizakuqhubeka siyi-ANC nemigaqo nkqubo yokubuyisa wabiwe uphuhliswe usetyenzwe umhlaba sisebenzisa imithetho efana ne-Land Court Bill kunye ne-Expropriation Bill, which was preceded by vigorous public hearings. As we committed during when the sixth parliament started and pledged to parliament will continue to play our enhanced and robust oversight. We stand here with the authority to affirm that the electoral reforms bill has been tabled in parliament, and we call on all people of South Africa to comment during the public hearings. ANC siyayixhasa inzame zikaRhulumente zokulwa qhophololo buqhetseba kunye nobuhalahume ezifana ne-Commission of Inquiry into State Capture kunye nophando olwenziwa yi-SIU ne-Hawks kwimibandela yorhwaphilizo. Siyayamkela into yoba kubekho abantu ababanjiweyo kwaye kubuyiswe nemali ethe yabiwa. Siyazibophelela siyi-ANC ukuba apha eParlamente uba yonke ingxelo ethe yaziswa sizayilandela into yoba mayi-implementwe. Somlomo, funeka simanyane ukulwa ukunyashwa kwamalungelo omama abantwana abo bakhubazekileyo nabo baphila kwisini esinye. Bonke abaphembeleli be-gender based violence and femicide funeka babanjwe. Siyayibulela mongameli into yoba uye uze ne-strategic plan kwaye kwaye uqinisekise into yoba uyayisayina imithetho emithathu epaswa yile palamente khona ukuze singenelele kwimpatho gadalala yoomama nabantwana. Le mithetho kananjalo incedisa into yoba oomama bakwazi ukufumana i-protection orders online, bangahambi bayojongana baqubisane naba bantu babahlukumezayo abababamba ngobhongwana. Le mithetho kananjalo ithi ityala aliboli, ingakumbi ityala lodlwengulo, nokuba ubudlwengulo iminyaka engama-20 eyodlulayo, kodwa le mithetho uzawubanjwa uthi nqa. Okwesithathu, ezinkundla zingamashumi 32 kwii-regions zinika oomama isidima sokuba amatyala ohlukunyezo angaxoxwa esidlangalaleni kusiva wonke umntu, kwaye akhawuleziswe, ahlonitshwe umama, akhuselwe isidima sakhe, kugwetywe abo benze okubi. Xa ndizawugqibela, Somlomo, our unity and diversity remains our strength. All South Africans should be committed to eradicating backward tendencies of tribalism, racism, patriarchy, and discrimination of the LGBTIQ+ community.
Honorable member, your time is up. Thank you. I thank you. The Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Madam Speaker, the Honourable President, wherever he is today, honourable members, this is a strange Sona to debate because large parts of the President's speech are straight from the DA's playbook. Let's be clear, that is a good thing. It's a good thing. Because what we need if we want to fight poverty is agreement of where and how jobs are created. And for the very first time, someone from that side of the House seems to get it. If we're honest, on Thursday night, the President didn't sound like a man leading the ANC, a party obsessed with centralized control of the economy and reliant on a massively bloated public sector. Channeling the DA, he said, and I quote, "Government doesn't create jobs, businesses create jobs. Government must create the conditions that will enable the private sector," unquote. But as we've seen today, what remains unclear is which of these views represents the real ANC. For almost 3 decades, this government has done about all that it possibly could to discourage job creation in the private sector through terrible draconian regulations and labour laws. For almost 3 decades, the ANC has stuck to its ideological guns of putting government and the state at the centre of economic growth and job creation. And for almost 3 decades, it's treated the small business owner as the enemy, doing all it can to extract taxes and exhaust their goodwill, forcing them to jump through extraordinary hoops of compliance and regulations, BEE, and a raft of other irrational requirements, not to mention the COVID regulations. And then suddenly, on Thursday night, we hear a different story. So what has changed? Now, Mr. President, I'm sure that you have seen and heard the analyst comments that you must have been reading the DA manifesto. But I agree with the Chief Whip of the ANC. But that statement needs to be corrected. Because a manifesto is merely a declaration of intentions, not achievements. Anybody can talk about what they want to do and the things that they would like to see done. None of the things that you appropriated from the DA came from a wish list. There are things we already do where we are in government. And so, you didn't borrow from the DA's manifesto, you took directly from the DA's track record. And that's a good thing. And it's also a very important distinction to make when trying to understand why this economy under your government remains trapped in quicksand. You see, it all comes down to the difference between talking and doing. And that's what we need to keep in mind when we debate the positive things that you said on Thursday. Are any of them likely to happen? So you talk about building a capable professional state, but you still insist on deploying unsuitable party loyalists to every single corner of the state. Meanwhile, the DA has shown you exactly what a capable, merit-based state can look like. You talk about solving the energy crisis and ending load shedding, and you've been talking about this for well over a decade now. But as we speak, DA governments stand ready to buy their power directly from independent power producers. You talk about making it easier for small and medium enterprises to operate and comply with regulations by cutting red tape, while the DA does exactly this. The Western Cape government has an incredibly successful red tape reduction unit, and we introduced a similar bill in Parliament only to have it shot down by the President's own party. You talk about paying government suppliers on time. DA governments consistently pay their suppliers within 30 days. You see, Mr. President, talking is easy, but doing makes the difference. And that is the DA difference. Cape Town Mayor Jordan Hill-Lewis has promised to make Cape Town the most business-friendly city on the continent and put it right up there amongst the best in the world. You might also know that Cape Town already tops the ease of doing business rankings in South Africa. And this has had a profound effect on new investments, which in turn has spared its residents the worst of the country's unemployment bloodbath. But that's not good enough. The rest of South Africa cannot be the benchmark. It's just too low. Cape Town wants to measure itself against the world and wants to roll out the red carpet for every possible new job-creating business. And that's what we mean by the DA difference, the measurable way in which people's lives improve where the DA governs. Mr. President, you even acknowledged this DA difference in the wake of the Parliament fire when you said, and I quote, "We do have one city that works, a province that works, and a government that works when the chips are down," unquote. The biggest DA difference of all is that we get things done. You talk year after year, the DA gets it done. It could have all been very different, though, Mr. President, when you embarked on your presidency some 4 years ago. You had all the goodwill and support that you needed to put our country back on its feet. It wasn't going to be easy, but you had it perfectly teed up. You were the darling of the media, businesses were falling over themselves to give money, and all you had to do was start delivering on some of your promises of your first Sona. Just a little bit of progress, and then a little bit more the following year, and a little bit more the next year. But the reality is that very little happened. And so South Africa's heard the same pronouncements and promises each year about how jobs are going to be created, how load shedding will end, how broadband spectrum will be auctioned, and how corruption would finally be dealt with. Every year, another task team, another social compact, another commission, another road show, another stakeholder engagement, all just kicking the can down the road at taxpayer expense. Now you tell us that your government has given itself, and I quote, 100 days to finalize a social compact to grow our economy, create jobs, and combat hunger, unquote. Now, no one here can argue with that. They're incredible goals. But what were you doing for the last 100 days? or the last 1,000 days for that matter. Our country's been in an absolute crisis for a very long time. And it's incomprehensible that you arrive at a Sona to tell us that you're now going to start thinking a plan. You should have used Sona to announce the plan. And not only the plan, but the progress on implementation. Don't say, do. And again on Thursday, you told us that those responsible for state capture will be punished. But if you had read the first two reports of the Zondo Commission, you would know that you still continue to employ many of those implicated in your own cabinet. In your fifth State of the Nation address, you're still promising South Africa prosecutions, yet not one of those implicated cadres has been charged or convicted. Don't say, do. So while I'd love to feel buoyed by the newfound insights of job creation, small enterprises, cutting red tape, simplifying labor laws, supporting our nation's employers, I've seen this film enough times to know that this is where it likely ends. And so does everyone else, which is why the common theme of the media analysis post your Sona was nice words, pity it will never happen. After all that goodwill and hope 4 years ago, you have today become the president of the comforting catchphrase, the soothing reassurance, and the empty promises. Doctor, do nothing. But here's the thing, Mr. President. We cannot have a conversation about this inaction without turning our attention to the real elephant in the room. Or should I say the 64 elephants in the room. And you know what I'm talking about, Mr. President. It's your cabinet ministers and their deputies. 64 of you, including 28 ministers, 34 deputy ministers, plus the deputy president and yourself. Even after trimming and consolidating ministries, you still preside over one of the biggest cabinets in the world. A massive jobs for cadres scheme where no one is too corrupt, too lazy, or too useless to land one of these plush jobs. Every energy reform, every measure to unshackle our economy, every intention to support small businesses is going to sink like a ton of bricks the moment you walk into your first cabinet meeting. Almost no one on your executive would be employable in the private sector. And frankly, you know that some of them should be behind bars. But instead of cleaning out your cabinet, you simply reshuffle the corrupt again and again, until every single ministry has the grubby fingerprints of failure all over it. You stand up in Sona and you talk about building a capable state, but you're not prepared to walk away from the very essence of state capture and the incapable state, the policy of cadre deployment. Clearly, Mr. President, you know what I'm saying is true. You know that your cabinet cannot be trusted to get things done. You've effectively admitted that by now setting up a parallel state in your own presidency. Your appointments like Sipho Nkosi, Mavuso Mzimang and Daniel Manele to do the job of your cabinet says it all. In a functional democracy, you would have fired most of your cabinet a long time ago. But we all know why you haven't. We've seen the video where without a hint of shame, you tell the room that you would rather be seen as a weak president than split the ANC, because that is not your mission. Your mission is to keep the ANC united. In other words, you see your job as holding together this ragtag mob of crooks and freeloaders, even if that means the destruction of our country. Why else would Minister Bheki Cele still have a job in your cabinet after the spectacular failure of the SAPs to protect people's lives and property during the riots of last year? Over 300 people lost their lives. You should hold him accountable, but you don't. Why does Minister Ayanda Dlodlo still have a job in your cabinet? As Minister of State Security, the lack of state intelligence during and preceding the July riots fell squarely on her shoulders. You should hold her accountable, but instead you simply redeployed her to public service and administration, While the third person responsible for July's chaos, the Defence Minister, found herself redeployed as the Speaker in this House. Why does Minister Lindiwe Sisulu still have a job as Tourism Minister? Over the past 28 years, she's left a trail of mediocrity across 5 different departments. And if that wasn't enough to get rid of her, surely her despicable attack on the judiciary and our Constitution was. Why does Minister Gwede Mantashe still have a job as Energy Minister? We've now entered our 14th year of load shedding. There are children at high school who've never known a life without blackouts. You can't speak to the world about green energy and fixing our electricity crisis while Mr. Cole can't see beyond fossil fuels. Will you hold him accountable for dragging our country back into the dark ages? Of course not. Why does Minister Patricia de Lille still have a job with Public Works? If the Beitbridge border fence fiasco wasn't enough reason to sack her, then surely the fact that our parliament burnt down on her watch should be. Why does Minister Angie Motshekga still serve as our Education Minister? She's had the same job for 13 years now. During this time, almost 6 million children have dropped out of school. Forget about the pass rate that she crows about every single year. It means nothing when half of the children in our country do not sit down to write their exams. If our widening inequality is as important as you try to make it sound, that is where you should start looking. Why does Minister Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams still have a job as Minister of Small Business Development? Her transgressions in her previous role as the Communications Minister and her flouting of lockdown regulations were already enough to fire her. So why promote her to this crucial portfolio, only then to appoint an outsider to come in and do her job? Why does Minister Lindiwe Zulu still have a job in your cabinet? Surely, when you saw her spraying people with a water cannon for the crime of waiting in a queue to collect a SASSA grant, there should have been no doubt that she's not suitable for the job. But there she is, still your Minister of Social Development. It seems like her and Minister Mbalula, just like every other deadbeat minister, are simply unfireable. And finally, why does Minister Ibrahim Patel still serve in your cabinet? If indeed you believe, as you said last week, that the private sector and not government should be creating jobs, why put a sworn communist in charge of trade and industry? A large part of our 46.6% unemployment rate stems from that. Accountability is something you only talk about, because actually doing something would mean firing some of your cabinet and upsetting your comrades. So, here's what's going to happen, Mr. President. Because you've shown that you're a president of talk and not a president of action, we are going to make it easier for you. Today, I've tabled a motion of no confidence, not in you, but in your whole cabinet, in terms of Section 102(1) of the Constitution. If it's not possible for you to do right by the people of South Africa, then we're going to take the burden off your hands and let this House fire them for you. And once we've done that, we're going to bring back all of our bills of reform to this House. The ISMO bill, the Ease of Doing Business bill, our Red Tape Impact Assessment bill, our Public Investment Corporation Amendment bill, our Small Enterprise Ombudsman bill, and our End Cadre Deployment bill. And then we'll let this House help you do your job by implementing the reforms that you could only talk about. And while we're doing that, our governments and metros and municipalities across the country will help you do your job by becoming less dependent on Eskom, by taking over more policing powers from national government, and hopefully by taking over and fixing commuter rail. Our governments will be doing all they can to fix the mess that you created in our schools. And our governments will make it easier to do business and create jobs as we try to undo the decades worth of damage of your failed economic policies. Because because we cannot sit through another year of your talk while our country slides further and further backwards and millions more of our citizens fall into poverty and unemployment. So, Mr. President, you can either stand back and watch us take over your duties one by one, or you can let us help you break the paralysis of your presidency by pushing through your own reforms in this House. I assure you, as I've done on many times before, that you will find a huge deal of support on our side of the House to get this reform agenda driven through Parliament. Mr. President, you may have just enough time left to rewrite your presidency and to build a legacy, but it's going to require you taking action, and action now. So what do you say, Mr. President, wherever you may be? Are we going to help you fire your cabinet and give your executive a new start? Will you let us help you drive through the economic reforms that are so desperately needed and which you spoke about on your Sona address, and which we know, as we've heard today, that your own comrades do not support? Or are you going to be content to see out your presidency and your term of office as the president who was too afraid to put his country before his party? That choice, Mr. President, is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Order. Order, colleagues. Honorable members, order. Order. May I now invite the Honorable J.S. Malema. The Minister in the Presidency. Honorable Malema, my apologies, and my apologies, Honorable Gungubele, it is your turn. Thank you.
Instigate. We stand a risk of being diverted to spend time clarifying the difference between facts and ideas. If there's one stupid thing you can do, is to spend time debating the difference between facts and ideas. Because we are known our philosophy of mixed economy, so we can't repeat it here. All I want to, a little bit of response to that, because I don't have time for that. The only thing I want to say before I spend time on your rhetoric is that the DA's difference is a racial difference, because you see it in Guguletu, in Philippi, in Tembalethu, in Oton, all over. The DA difference is a racial difference. You see it in police station in Guguletu and see it in police station in Bishop's Court. But your peers, Nindivine.
Order, honorable members. Order, allow the speaker to speak. Order!
President of the Republic, His Excellency Deputy President Mabuza, colleagues in the executive, members of Parliament, distinguished guests, fellow South Africans, I greet you on this Valentine's Day, hoping that those amongst us who celebrate this day also carry with them the spirit of love for the beautiful people of this our resilient nation. Let us take inspiration from those who dedicated their lives to a just world and humanity, dignity for all, and Dr. Che Guevara's assertion that, open quote, a true revolutionary is guided by a great feeling of love. It is impossible to think of a genuine revolutionary lacking this quality, close quote. So happy Valentine's to all of you across party lines. Guided by this love for your people, Mr. President, when you addressed South Africa on Thursday, you unequivocally spoke to their frustrations, dejections, their vulnerabilities, demonstrating to the nation that you are alive to the underlying factors responsible for their desperation as it emanates from the state of inequality, poverty, unemployment, and security. You have captured the imagination of our people as you went on to ignite their hope to heal their aspirations. Your undertaking to intervene in areas of security, infrastructure, cost of doing business, water scarcity, network industries, myriad of youth programs, gender equality, etc., including progress reviews demonstrated that you know it is not enough to acknowledge problems when nothing is done about them. We support the President's assertion that unprecedented steps must be taken to strengthen and affirm our commitment to a constitution that protects us all. We oblige to this mandate to redress the iniquities of the past and ensure the progressive realization of assured prosperity. Mr. President, your comprehensive and responsive address was a rallying call to all people of South Africa to join hands in building a better life for all. By calling for a new social compact to implement South Africa's transformation agenda, you are affirming our constitutional directive that national unity in pursuit of human prosperity is a timeless phenomenon. You are alerting our minds to two fundamental revolutionary goals: that correcting the ills of the past and building a new South Africa which is inclusive, purely on the basis of humanity, are two sides of the same coin, which is nation building. I want to submit, Mr. President, that when these two are separated, a dream of a new South Africa is a dream deferred. The State of the Nation address affirmed that to secure the pride and conviction of the people behind the historic mission of their country is derived from the participation of all of them. Therefore, we appreciate that for all South Africans to unleash their energies for the success of Project South Africa, they want a government which is consistent, coherent, and predictable, because predictable is a basis for leveraging on the energies of our people. Honorable Speaker, in fostering this new consensus, we seek involvement of compatriots whose interest is a shared prosperity of the people of South Africa from all sectors of society. On the 25th of January 2022, President Ramaphosa inducted a third National Planning Commission, which is an independent think tank that provides advice to government. This body will lead the government the development of strategy for post-COVID-19 social and economic recovery, assist in establishing social compacts with various stakeholders, and support the realization of the objectives of the NDP Vision 2030. Mr. President, your State of the Nation address made a clarion call of implementation to all the revolutionaries of conscience. Your undertakings have created conditions to complete the National Annual Strategic Plan and to ensure that the departmental annual performance plans are responsive to the priorities you have committed government to achieve. As I'm talking to you, our teams are busy at work in that regard. As the team incorporates Sona priorities outlined, our state of readiness for 2022-23 financial year will sharply focus on high-ranking results based on monitoring of progress and engaging departments on the remedial actions on a monthly, quarterly, and biannual basis. As part of our commitment to taking the people of South Africa along in our journey to reconstruction and recovery post-COVID-19 pandemic, we will in the next coming weeks, through the Department of Government Communication and Information System, table a communications and stakeholder engagement plan to engage society broadly through Imbizo on the new social compact beyond the confines of the organized formations. We want all South Africans to have a voice in the direction the country must take as we recourse together towards Vision 2030. Mr. President, you have, in the interest of transparency and the restoration of public trust, laid bare the report of the State Capture Report, the SIU report, the expert panel report on July 2021, civil unrest, which are all pointing to one thing, namely, that the state capture project had successfully weakened the capability of government and a number of public institutions, including, amongst others, SARS, DINEL, ESCOM, NPA, state security, amongst others. It is therefore not surprising that you call for rebuilding of public institutions in defense of our democratic gains. You have also sent a devastating message to the criminals, looters, and fraudsters. In other words, you have laid the platform on the basis of which your leadership should be scrutinized, and you have done that without equivocation. You said that you will table the implementation plan of the State Capture Report no later than June 2021. I want to assure you, Mr. President, that your directive will be complied with. Work is currently underway on the volumes of the report, which are already at our disposal. And implementing the recommendation, no stone will be left unturned. In building the capability of the state, the Presidency is setting up a system for coordinating the implementation of all SIU recommendations across the multiple departments, spheres, and agencies responsible for implementation. This will overcome gaps in accountability and allow us to monitor and detect where is inadequate progress in implementation. Honorable Speaker, we want Parliament to know that we will be tabling this implementation plan to the Standing Committee on Public Accounts just end of this month. While this initiative is a work in progress, it does not stop us from immediately pursuing implementation of recommendation the SIU has made in respect of various investigations. As part of our commitment to revamp our country's security services, we are in the process of putting together a plan which will, through the National Security Cluster Secretariat, be concluded and tabled before the National Security Council for adoption. As per your speech, we are already filling a number of vacancies, not waiting for the completion of that plan. Regarding the so-called concentration of power in the office of the President, Mr. President, it is our view that interventions of a given time will always determine the reorganization of the Presidency to assist the Presidency in leadership of his country at all material times. Therefore, we are not surprised and we see nothing strange in that. Honorable members, the times for diagnosis is over, ours is to implement. This one area where our commitment to build the capacity of the state, this is one area where our commitment to build the capacity of the state will be tested. There can be no better warning than those reports. All that is required is for us to demonstrate that we have been warned. I also wish to add to the President's gratitude to whistleblowers and media for their bravery in exposing state capture and the commitment and directive by the President to law enforcement agencies to take immediate steps to protect whistleblowers. Mr. President, the President has assured members of this august Parliament that he would engage them in public participation programs to ensure that the executive remain accountable to Parliament in its activities. Honourable members, the President spoke at length about the importance of building a capable, ethical, and developmental state, and progress that we have made in professionalizing the civil service. Linked to this is our continuous campaign to combat and eliminate corruption within the public service. Building a capable, ethical, and developmental state also entails ability to coordinate across departments and the three spheres of government. Hence, our resolve to institutionalize and integrate government planning systems and other interventions, which include the implementation of cabinet cluster systems, the district development model, evidence-based M&E, and the annual performance plan, amongst others. Fellow South Africans, the Census 22 that is underway is crucial to ensure better understanding of the demographic and development trends to enable evidence-based planning in our country. I call on everyone to welcome the enumerators into your homes and get counted. For the first time, we have modernized the process and included a digital system for online participation.
Member, your time is up.
Thank you.
The Honorable J.S. Malema.
Thank you very much, Speaker, President, and the Deputy President. You are not in my speech, Deputy President. I see you, so I'm including you in the speech. The 2021 local government elections have now scientifically demonstrated through the elections that less than 50% of the people of South Africa have confidence in the former liberation movement, which has been in power since 1994. Our people have been patient with the former liberation movement for more than 27 years, gave you the majority mandate to govern society with the hope and belief that you will defeat poverty through development of economy, creation of jobs, reductions of inequalities. It is evident now that despite the confidence given to the former liberation movement for more than 27 years, government has been unable to defeat poverty, failed to grow the economy, and dismally failing to create jobs. South Africa has the highest level of joblessness in the world, and there is no believable program and plan to create jobs for our people. More than 10 million South Africans who are capable of working and are willing to work cannot find jobs anywhere. And these are black people who are systematically excluded from meaningful economic participation under colonialism and apartheid. When political apartheid ended in 1994, our people had hope that majority black government will use their capacity of the state to develop productive forces, redistribute wealth, and create quality sustainable jobs for all. When faced with the question of the wide poverty problem and crisis, the apartheid government used the state and government to create opportunities for their own people and almost completely eradicated joblessness and poverty amongst white people. Today, they say government can't create jobs, it must be a private sector. But we know that during apartheid, they established state-owned institutions with an aim and a purpose of employing white people, particularly the illiterate Afrikaners. The post-1994 government has served to entrench this colonial and apartheid reality of making white people richer and black people poorer. The poverty and the joblessness of black people is getting worse under the current administration, with more than 1.7 million people who were previously employed losing jobs, and majority, if not all of these jobs, were lost in the private sector, which we are told it can create jobs. Despite this basic and verifiable reality and statistic, a president of a former liberation movement comes here to say that government does not create jobs and the hopeless people of our people must wait for private sector to create jobs for them. Sending our people to the private sector for jobs is like sending a cattle for slaughter. What we know about the private capitalist sector is that its purpose has never been and will never be about creation of jobs. The purpose of a capitalist industry to exist is not for jobs purposes. The purpose and sole purpose of capitalism and the private sector is to make profit. That is why private companies always adopt new technologies that seeks to replace workers with machines. That is why the private companies always force government to weaken labor protection laws, because they want to super exploit workers and pay them low and no wages without consequences. That is why private companies always prefer to employ undocumented immigrants, because they force them to work for longer hours and pay them almost nothing. That is why private companies are willing to destroy the environment, dirty our rivers and pollute the environment as long as they can make profit. That is why private companies use private armies, security companies, and even police to shoot and kill workers who demand higher wages. Workers who were demanding higher wages in Marikana were killed by the ANC government, and the sole purpose was to protect private companies' right to maximize on profit. That is why all major capitalist corporations, particularly in the mining sector, are involved in tax avoidance and illicit financial flows, because they want to shift their profits to countries with low or no taxes at all. There is no private capitalist corporation that has as its primary objective the purpose of creating jobs. They are all obsessed with profits at the expense of our people. Despite all this, a president comes here to say our people must go to the private sector for jobs. What is evident is all these things is that the former liberation movement has now officially admitted to what we said when we launched the EFF in 2013, that the former liberation movement is incapable of and will not transform political power into economic power. Kwame Nkrumah was always correct that political power without economic power is meaningless. The former liberation movement has admitted that it will not use its political power to develop the productive forces and create jobs for our people. It is also historically and very incorrect to suggest that the sole role of government and the state is to create conditions for the private sector to create jobs. The history of capitalism, whether private or state capitalism, whether in the West or East, has demonstrated that the state always plays a direct role in the creation and protection of jobs. Let us perhaps give practical examples. China is the fastest growing economy in the world. South Africa and Africa's biggest trading partner, has a significant state-owned sector of the economy that led to economic expansion, built infrastructure, and created millions of jobs. The Great Corporation of China, established in 2002, is a state-owned and employs more than 1.5 million people. China National Petroleum Corporation is a state-owned and employs close to 500,000 people. Emirates Airline, which is state-owned, employs more than 100,000 people. So these are many other examples that we can always give where the state plays a significant role and create jobs. State Bank of India, which is owned by the government of India, employs almost 250,000 people. So the story that government cannot create jobs is neither here nor there. There are many other examples we can give you that demonstrate that the most rapid development of the productive forces happens under the state leadership and guidance. We are giving the real examples of these countries in BRICS bloc because these are important strategic partners to South Africa and the entire African continent historically, now and in the future. You never said anything about BRICS, actually never gave any noteworthy analysis of the global balance of forces as if South Africa exists in isolation. We've never had a president of a country who conclude a speech without giving an analysis of the globe and the politics thereof. What we want to caution you through, though, in that none of the countries in the G7, the colonial and imperialist forces you find comfort with, are genuine friends of South Africa and African continent. We define South Africa and the entire African continent to these Western imperialist countries, particularly in the G7, as neo-colonialism. These countries have for centuries pillaged and raped the African continent and robbed us of our resources, and any person who believes that there can ever be a developmental relationship between Africa and the West is either a fool or something else. The only engagement that African continent can and must have with these imperialist forces is to stop them from stealing our minerals. We as Parliament and all progressive forces must work towards strengthening our politics, social, economic relationship with progressive forces, particularly China and Russia. We must not be apologetic about that. These countries openly associated with the struggle against colonialism and apartheid, and they will never shortchange us for material gains. Mr. President, you must admit that under your leadership, South Africa is in worse condition than it has ever been. You are currently the worst president to have ever occupied that position, and you are the worst president that has ever occurred to black people, and we are not surprised that black people are getting poorer under your leadership. There is no successful black businessman who was thriving before you became president who can claim that he's still thriving under your leadership. All those BEE deals which were sealed before you came in, they were terminated by white capital because they said they no longer need BEE partners. They've got you. You will protect them. Everyone who supported you, every business person, black business person who donated money into the CR17 and campaign, today says a different story because you have abandoned all of them for your own white monopoly capital. Under your leadership, we have the highest level of poverty and suffering of black people, the highest level of unemployment, the most disorganized and compromised security sector, the most frequently electricity cuts and load shedding, high levels of corruption. Parliament banned under your leadership of government, and not because it was banned by a homeless person, but due to negligence, dysfunctional public health care system and infrastructure. Our education infrastructure is still incomplete, and children still go to mud schools and use pit toilets. Neglect of the sports, arts and culture sector, which you never said anything about during Sona. You never ever said, not even a word, about sports, arts and culture. And that shows that you have no regard for all those young people who are involved in these activities. High levels of crime, dismal failure of the state criminal justice system to decisively deal with gender-based violence and femicide. Local government, particularly in rural areas, is dysfunctional, with more than 128 municipalities in financial distress. Under your tenure as president, the situation in South Africa has gone from bad to worse. The fact of the matter is, Mr. President, your dream of being a president has come true. Please, now that you have fulfilled your dream of wanting to become a president, why are you not leaving us in peace? Because the highest ambition you ever held was to become a president. You have become a president. Now you want to come and serve for a second term. To do what? Because you are not doing anything. You are just on top, but doing nothing on top. What began as a so-called new dawn has become massive unemployment, increased violence against women and children, collapsing hospitals, and the greatest threats against the security of the state in the post-democratic South Africa. The state-owned enterprises have all collapsed under Jamnandas, but you can't do anything because you are very scared of Jamnandas, who played a central role in raising funds for CR17. You are forever indebted to him, even when he's not performing well. Imagine ministers are being called here by your friends that they must resign, but they don't call the name of Jamnandas because he is their friend. He's not failing them in ensuring that they discriminate against our African brothers. We want you not to surrender this country to the Ruperts.
Honorable member, please take your seat. There's a point of order. Honorable Khatebe. Okay. Thank you. Honorable Khatebe, please use a mic.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. According to Rule 14.0, we cannot call each other by first names. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Honorable Malema. Honorable Praveen is Honorable Praveen, not Chamlandas. Thank you very much. Honorable Member Chamlandas or Praveen. Thank you. You may proceed.
Mr. Jamlandas, what began as a so-called new dawn has become a massive unemployment, increased violence against women and children, collapsing hospitals, the greatest threat against the security of the state in post-democratic South Africa. When you assumed office, we want you in the same way we want your predecessor, that the people of this country have not elected you to act in the interest of a small elite. We want you not to surrender this country to the Ruperts and the Oppenheimers, who played a vital role in funding your lifelong dream of being a president of this country. Unfortunately, you did not listen to this warning and became a shapeless individual whose term was an important concoction of special envoys, presidential task teams and summits. You wasted 5 years setting up structures in which you placed your friends from the business sector to resolve political problems. You did this because you mistook government to be the same as running a company. As a result, our people's suffering intensified while you sat and waited for capital to rescue the situation. You now want to auction off the country to the highest bidder by privatization of state-owned companies, and we all know who will buy state-owned assets, the white minority capitalist class that is at the core of your leadership of our people. We reject all forms of privatization that you plan to embark on, and we will go to the streets to reject any form of privatization. We gave you an opportunity to reclaim the land through our proposed amendment of Section 25 of the Constitution, and you hijacked our motion, distorted it, and asked us to only expropriate abandoned and rotten land. We rejected that with contempt. What do we do with rotten land? What are we going to do with a rotten land which is not productive? We want land that is prime. We want land that is of value to our people. There is absolutely nothing that you have done for black people. You seem to think that each State of the Nation address is the beginning of a new term as president, which is why there is no consistency and implementation of your own objectives. We will today take you through the mess you presided over and your many unfulfilled promises. In 2019, you claimed that you plan to ignite economic activity, restore investor confidence, support employment, and address the urgent challenges that affect the lives of vulnerable members of our society. Since then, you have been in charge for 15 financial year quarters, of which 8 had negative growth with technical recession in the process. From the last State of the Nation address in 2021 to date, unemployment has increased from 30.8% to 34.9%. In 2019, you said to us you will create 275,000 additional direct jobs every year. When you became president in 2018, unemployment was 26.7%, sitting at 5.9 million people. In 2021 quarter 3, the unemployment rate increased from 34.9%, increasing to 7.6 million people. To put this simply, more than 1.7 million people have lost their jobs since you became president. You have now abandoned your strategy of summits and thumb-sucked job creation figures and told us that the private sector must create jobs. You do this because you are running from absolute failure to create employment. The suggestion that the private sector must lead to job creation is a neoliberal policy born out of consensus reached by the G7 when they summoned you to take pictures with them like a child. You have now returned here, conspired with a racist official opposition to force down capitalist understanding of development that sidelines a democratically elected government. The state must be at the center of job creation, and any compromise on that is an attempt to turn this country into a PTY LTD. The state of security in this country is beyond embarrassing, and you have done nothing to give an impression that our people are safe under your leadership. You took the whole intelligence into your office and appointed the most unintelligent person to head the intelligence. He always liked posturing and giving an impression that he's an ideologue. He came here before me. You saw him, Honorable Mbuiseni. He was like this. There is a difference between idea and facts. Let me tell you, like he's going to say something abstract and says nothing. That's him. He's like that. And that's how he finishes the president all the time in the office. You see, Mr. President, nothing. You have passed a motion of no confidence on a young person in a form of Zizigodo. That is the young person that you should be grooming, who should be correcting that institution of the intelligence and make it functional. I do not understand this thing, Honorable Deputy President. Your hatred for your young people is visible. You hate young people with passion, and a young person with potential gets to be destroyed in your organization. What is wrong with giving Zizi the full responsibility of being a minister of intelligence and allow this minister who came before me to accompany his friends on the trips and leave the intelligence to young people? Now, there are thugs today going around calling themselves Operation Dudula, who are harassing innocent people, demanding proof of citizenship. Nothing is happening to them. These armed individuals operate freely because they know this country is run by cowards. They call themselves Operation Dudula. They put guns, they display guns openly on the streets of South Africa in front of the police. Yet police do not act against those thugs that intimidate our people. There was a video circulating of an African old lady who was crying, being forced to take out her ID by these thugs. Yet government can't do anything against these criminals. Violent crime is at all-time high. That is the mistake you did. Honorable Begitele was not supposed to be a minister of police because he was a commissioner of police. There is no way he can be a minister of police and not compete with the commissioner of police, because he knows that responsibility and he knows what you can do with that responsibility. It was a miscalculated move. If anything, you should have taken Ndozi to the army and give someone different the police who will not compete with the commissioner of police. We will never defeat crime in this country for as long as the competition in the police is not stopped. And the only way to stop that competition is to remove Minister of Police and send him somewhere else so that we can fight crime. Crime in this country, cash in transit haste, is at a high level, not because it cannot be fought. There is one December where Minister Begitele fought criminals to a point where there was zero in December. There was zero cash in transit haste. We can't say the same today, caused by this unnecessary competition we have. And what is even worse is that you've got police and the soldiers committing cash in transit haste, which is a very clear state of a rotten security cluster we have in this country. Speaker, we are making a clarion call that there must be a clear change in the security cluster. Otherwise, our women and children will never be safe in this country. We want our people to reclaim the streets, and we need to fight crime decisively. A person is just called John Wick, and then he goes around Mamelodi killing people with ease, and government can't do anything because of competition between a minister and a police commissioner. We want to say to the president, if you want to pass a motion of no confidence in your ministers, stop using your friends by appointing them into positions in your office. You are appointing your friends to come and play the role that must be played by your ministers. What is the point in appointing a person to come and cut red tape? The red tape is a responsibility of Treasury. When people were looting and stealing money of PPE, you called Treasury to issue regulations. Treasury issued regulations, and that nonsense stopped immediately. Treasury has got capacity to deal with the issues of red tape because they are the ones who issue these red tapes, who say you must follow the following things before you pay a small business. Now you come and appoint a guy from outside. The government is very hostile, if you don't know, Mr. President. They are not going to cooperate with that person because he's going to be seen as an outsider. You need Treasury to cut the red tape. We need to remove the Department of Small Business because it's not adding any value. If anything, these red tapes that affect small business, it was supposed to be the Department of Small Business that intervenes on behalf of small business and make sure that they survive. But now you have gone to fetch one of your own to come and play a role of a minister. You have now called another one to come and play a role of Minister of Environment. If a person must go around convincing people on our environmental policy and seeking funding, what is the role of a Minister of Environmental Affairs? Why are you not removing these ministers that you are passing motions of no confidence on and replace them with your friends, because that's what you want to do? If you think that these friends that you are appointing in the presidency, they are so smart and better than your own ministers, why are you not appointing them and costing us more money? Because these people are not going to perform this job freely. You are costing us a lot of money. You have ballooned the presidency unnecessary to take care of your own friends. So we are saying the Department of Small Business must be closed because small business must be part of all the departments. Why should a small business be a department? In every department, you've got a responsibility to make sure that you empower small business. Every year, you come here without fail to come and tell us about how cheap your suit is and how cheap your shoes are. What unnecessary utterances, trying to demonstrate to us that you are buying South African. Why are you not telling us how much and what percentage of your budget are you spending on buying local as government? Because the government is the biggest buyer in South Africa. If you can buy local as government and spend the budget local, you will have empowered a lot of people. Not this individual demonstration of cheap arrangement is not going to help anything. What is going to help is to say to government, you are going to buy local. Why is Matache prison buying food in Polokwane and not buying food in Thohoyandou in Venda and empowering the farmers there in Venda who are going to be the suppliers of that Matache prison? Why are the people who are supplying food for kids, feeding scheme in Kaelicha, not buying local from Khayelitsha as a policy, that nothing is going to come outside Khayelitsha. That requires decisive leadership, which you are not known for. We are asking you, when you come to respond here, please withdraw that thing that you are not going to create jobs. You have killed the hopes of a lot of young people with that statement. You have destroyed them. These people who are looking for government to come and rescue them out of poverty, you stood here and told them it will never happen. They rely on you, they trusted you, you came here and destroyed the hopes of the hopeless masses of our people. Shame on you, Mr. President. You have destroyed young people of South Africa. You have destroyed
Honorable Malema, your time has expired.
Let's remove this ANC from power.
Honorable Member, thank you. Honorable, the Deputy Chairperson of the Council.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Ons waai maar net die negatieve energie weg.
Order, honorable members, order.
Baie dankie, achtbare Speaker. President, my ouma het al het gesê, jy moet maar net hoor, maar jy nie doof is nie. Speaker of the National Assembly, Chairperson of the National Council of Provinces, Deputy Speaker, His Excellency the President of the Republic of South Africa, His Excellency the Deputy President of the Republic of South Africa, Ministers, Premiers, Members of Parliament, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I want once again to express my appreciation to be part of this auspicious debate. Antonio Gramsci once said, social reformers should have pessimism of the intellect and optimism of the will. This means that we must have intellectual capacity to critically unpack the prevailing realities and resolve to prevail through strategic interventions to bring about the desired change. South Africa is one of many nations around the world engaged in a concentrated struggle to defeat the coronavirus and reverse its impact on our social and economic realities. We must therefore stand in unity as a nation across all sectors of society to construct the social compact that is required to create a more unified, more equal, and a prosperous South Africa for all. Honorable President, we welcome the frank assessment you made in the State of the Nation address of the state of South Africa's economy and the wide-ranging measures unveiled, particularly with regard to the economic reconstruction and recovery plan, which put the creation of jobs at the heart of our economic recovery. In recognizing that the ERRP is a functional strategy to lead the poor and economically marginalized out of poverty and inequality, it is imperative that all aspects of the plan become the battleground for the advancement of transformation. We must also proceed to identify opportunities and threats to inclusive growth and remove all obstacles that will decelerate the implementation of this plan. At the center of our current developmental trajectory should be our collective resolve to eradicate poverty, hunger, joblessness, and socio-economic exclusion. Furthermore, in localizing the implementation of this plan, the district development model must be placed at the center of our implementation process. This will ensure that every province, district, and locality adequately benefits from the economic opportunities that must emerge from this plan. To this end, Poverty mapping perspectives, as well as the untapped economic potential of each province, district and locality, must be clearly delineated in order to ensure that local economic activities adequately respond to the growth potential of the landscape in each province. Honourable President, a deeper understanding of South Africa's growth catalyzing sectors, particularly in the current COVID-19 context, is of utmost importance. ERRP plans must be supported by better communication processes, better coordination, and an emphasis on clear deliverables and implementation timelines. We welcome the reviewing of the Business Act of 1991 alongside a broad review of legislation that affects small, medium, and micro enterprise, particularly, Honourable President, because the majority of informal traders remain the women of South Africa. Research institutes, thought leaders, and academics all agree that South Africa is not a country that is poor in ideas and the appropriate legislative frameworks. It is the inability of the broader state machinery to implement these ideals, which stands as a key decelerator of policy implementation, which inadvertently impedes substantive transformation. It is therefore absolutely critical that we undertake a skills and capacity audit across the public sector, particularly across the implementing spheres that are tasked with critical implementation mandates. Parliament must be appraised on the capacity levels of each sphere, as well as the systemic and institutional design challenges that exist, that continue to impede policy implementation. State capacity should not merely be viewed as an abstract concept that we make reference to when it is appropriate. It should also not be used as a battle point where we want to fight one another. It should be recognized as the underlying and fundamental factor in the confluence of challenges that relate to policy implementation. It is imperative that define the nature of capacity challenges across the various levels and strata of our state machinery. Interventions to address capacity matters must therefore be regularly reported on and as a key intervention to advance implementation. While government puts systems in place to re-engineer its processes to accelerate implementation, it is imperative that Parliament should play a decisive and robust oversight role throughout this process. Parliament, as part of the broader state machinery, has a very strategic role to play to ensure that it holds the executive accountable. This important exercise of oversight and accountability should, however, not be viewed as a reckless and punitive exercise of power. Oversight is not about the legislative arm antagonizing and hounding the executive. It is about working cooperatively and in unison with great reference for the powers and provisions of the Constitution, which are vested in each arm of state to advance the realization of a common agenda. With only 2.5 years remaining in the sixth dispensation, we must seize the opportunity presented by the pandemic to accelerate the implementation of the priorities contained in the MTSF and the electoral mandate. Since this is the year of unity and renewal to defend and advance South Africa's democratic gains, we call on government to develop the necessary analytical, methodological tools and mechanisms for monitoring and evaluation to accelerate the implementation of gender-responsive planning, budgeting, monitoring, evaluation, and auditing framework, and to ensure there is implementation of this framework across all spheres of government. After undertaking the review of the 1994 Women's Charter, as guided by the demands of the women of South Africa, we launched the 2021 Women's Charter, which is the current demand document for the women of South Africa. That charter contains 12 strategic priorities, which cover all strategic matters pertinent for the advancement of gender transformation and women's social, political, and economic empowerment. In 2022, Parliament will proceed to create the appropriate oversight mechanisms across the three spheres of government in order to track implementation progress on a quarterly basis of the 2021 Women's Charter for accelerated development. I am pleased to indicate to you, Honorable President, that Parliament has established sound working relations across all spheres of government. Through the review process, premiers and mayors across local government have committed themselves to cooperating with the legislative sector to ensure that we make tangible commitments to accelerate gender transformation. Speakers of all provincial legislatures have participated in these processes in order to ensure that we advance gender transformation. It is therefore our hope, as we continue with this critical gender transformation project, that we continue to record measurable milestones and progress in gender responsive planning, budgeting and implementation. The struggle against patriarchy and the systemic oppression of women demands sustained confrontation and the robust participation of all sectors of society. Women therefore demand that government must incorporate tangible gender perspective into the design, development, adoption and execution of all budgetary processes as appropriated by Parliament in order to promote equitable, effective and appropriate resource allocation to support gender equality. Importantly, sector master plans must also be developed in a gendered and gender-sensitive manner so as to give women equitable access to existing and emerging economic recovery and reconstruction projects across our provinces, metros, districts and locality. As we approach the tabling of the budget, we call on National Treasury to ensure that government departments and agency budgets are linked to gender equality outcomes and for the Auditor General to be engaged to include gender performance indicators in the assessment of financial management processes. Gender-based violence is still endemic and has eroded the social fabric of our society. Government, through the leadership of the State President, has put in place various strategic response plans to prevent gender-based violence and to empower victims of gender-based violence. Stopping this violence starts with believing survivors, adopting comprehensive and inclusive approaches that tackle the root causes, transform harmful social norms, and empower women and girls with survivor-centered essential services across policing, justice, health, social sectors, and sufficient financing for the women's rights agenda. Equally, as we are making headway with spreading the message of women empowerment, we must not forget the boy child. We must acknowledge that, and I quote, "You cannot have a holistic girl child without a well-rounded boy child," close quote. We must inculcate in the boy child values of equality and human dignity and encourage our boys to see the girl child as an equal and not as an object to dominate and oppress. We must recognize that the boy child is also a victim of gender conditioning, socio-cultural norms, examples of toxic masculinity that we see on display all over, even in Parliament, violent behavior and the oppression of women. Therefore, a neglected boy child generally grows up to be a bigger danger to society. We need to advocate for an education which will educate and inculcate in the boy child a paradigm of equality and a respect for feminism. Programs to build gender equity and counter GBV must be made mandatory in the workplace, in both the public and the private sector, including the educational system. We will have to activate our community-based systems through Know Your Neighborhood campaigns to shift harmful gender attitudes, roles, and social norms. We must find ways. There's no D. We must, yes, but it's fine. Some of us was born before technology, so it's fine. We must find ways and means to increase funding for mental health and supporting counseling program. Whilst raising all of the above, Honorable President, allow us to congratulate you and your collective for signing the 3 new anti-gender-based violence bills and clearing up the DNA backlog for processing. Indeed, the implementation of these pieces of legislation will go a long way in ensuring that cases are successfully prosecuted and that there are more effective deterrents in place. What we as South Africa therefore demand is to do away with poor or inadequate coordination of government interventions and the non-enforcement of legislation passed and agreed upon through effective and robust oversight. The uprisings that took place in Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal in July of 2021 demonstrated the manifestation of the deep-seated social and economic inequalities which are still prevalent in our society today. The report by the independent panel also concedes that some of the contributing factors which led to an escalation of pre-existing circumstances includes the poorly rolled out programs of service delivery, unacceptable living conditions, the state of the economy, and persistent levels of poverty. These realities, according to the findings of the independent panel, serve to provide the ripe environment for the poor and dejected to join in the looting catastrophe. It is also important to indicate that the COVID-19 pandemic also served as a contributing factor, exacerbating an already dire socio-economic and developmental crisis. The lessons we must take from this experience is that South Africans have demonstrated a deep sense of desperation as intensified by the brunt endured by the poor. The July unrest has issued a sharp and emphatic call to the collective leadership of this country that transformation can no longer be waited for. Socio-economic transformation is an agenda for today. It is an agenda that demands urgent responses, urgent prioritization, and urgent implementation. Frantz Fanon insists that praxis must be rooted in the temporal, that each generation must confront the living reality of its own situation, accept its own call to battle, gather its own weapons.
Honorable Member, your time is up.
I so much wanted to say, before I go down, I just want to say, through the fire and through the crisis, the resilience that was displayed by Parliament is leading us
Time is up.
into a new time frame. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson.
Yes, thank you very much, Honorable Lucas. I'm told that Honorable MG Buthelezi is experiencing some problems, so instead of him, we'll have Honorable Singh, the Chief Whip of the IFP. Honorable Singh.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson of the NCOP, Your Excellency the President, Deputy President, Honorable Speaker, and Honorable Members. In times of crisis, more than at any other time, the President must lead government in communicating a single, clear message about what is happening, why it is happening, and what the government is doing to address the matter. These words, Your Excellency, are taken from the report of the expert panel that investigated the July 2021 civil unrest. That orgy of violence left 354 dead and thousands injured. It wiped 50 billion of South Africa's economy and destroyed thousands of jobs. It left a deep and lasting wound in our nation, and it could have been avoided. Despite constant warnings from the National Intelligence Coordinating Committee, the need to stop corruption in government and start addressing the needs of people kept being kicked down the road like the proverbial can. Again, Your Excellency, these are the words of the report. As damning as it is, this report does not stand in isolation. It comes on the heels of the report on state capture and the SIU's report on corruption in PPE procurement, and the Global Risks Report of the World Economic Forum. We ignore or cherry-pick from these reports at our peril, for they warn of state collapse, the hollowing out of state institutions, sponsored state capture, national instability, and a culture of violence and criminality within the ruling party. The question we are faced with, honorable members, is whether in this time of crisis, the President has provided a single, clear message about what is happening, why it is happening, and what his government is going to do to address the matter. And then, as we always do in Parliament, we must ask the follow-up question, can we believe the President? Honourable Speaker, Honourable Prince Buthelezi does not question the President's integrity or even his intent. Indeed, he pities the President, for it would be impossible to address even a fraction of the flood of expectations. But his concern is with the political will and the ability of the ruling party to do everything the President has committed to do in his State of the Nation address. There is a strong precedent to suggest that no matter what the President tells us during Sona, it is not a blueprint but a wish list. It lists all the things that would be nice to have. Yet, year after year, the commitments made during Sona are delayed, changed, or unfulfilled. Like the President, Honourable Prince Buthelezi believes he cannot respond to even a fraction of what should be addressed, but we must take stock of what the President called the foremost overriding priorities of 2021, and I list them. Defeating the coronavirus pandemic, accelerating economic recovery, creating jobs, fighting corruption, and strengthening the state. While 60% of our people over the age of 50 are fully vaccinated against COVID-19, for those between the ages of 18 and 34, that figure is just 28%. To put it differently, 72% of young South Africans are not protected by a vaccine. This should drive home, honourable members, the importance of PPEs as the first line of defence in saving lives. How is it then that PPE procurement became a cesspool of dodgy deals, implicating more than 200 government officials in thousands of irregular contracts to the tune of billions of rand? Honourable Chairperson, we have the single clear message about what is happening. It is time to face the truth about why it is happening. Without that, any message about what government is doing to address the matter will be empty intention. Honourable Prince Buthelezi has commended you before, Honourable President, on moving away from the previous era of telling us a good story. You excel in your blunt assessment of the facts. In February last year, you told us, and I quote, our unemployment rate now stands at a staggering 30.8%. That was true. But then you told us, and I quote, as a result of the relief measures that we implemented and the phased reopening of the economy, we expect to see a strong recovery in employment by the end of the year, close quote. That strong recovery in unemployment was nowhere to be seen, as the unemployment rate climbed to 34.4% in the second quarter of 2021 and reached a record high of 34.9% in the third quarter. Within 1 year, the economically inactive population grew by close to 1 million people. Honourable Chairperson, with our country's gross inequalities, some felt the emptiness of Sona's cheery optimism more than others. By the third quarter of 2021, the official unemployment rate among black South African women was 41.5%. Our women still bear the brunt of an economic crisis that is simply not being handled correctly. In the mind of Honourable Buthelezi and the caucus leaders, we hear the refrain of Nina Simone calling us to celebrate being young, gifted, and black. But there is pain in being young, gifted, and black when there is no place for you in the labour market and opportunities in the economy are inaccessible. To be young, female, and black is to stack the odds even higher against social and economic justice. The IFP, therefore, supports the laudable intervention of a relief grant. Last year, we heard that the social and economic relief package was providing additional grant payments to almost a third of our country's population. Yet, by January this year, the SIU had uncovered 2.1 billion rand worth of irregular contracts. 224 government officials or entities were referred for disciplinary action, and 386 referrals were sent to the National Prosecuting Authority. Again, there is a single clear message about what is happening. But why is it happening, Mr. President? How has this level of corruption been allowed to establish itself within a government that is meant to be for the people? It's not as if we weren't warned. In September 2020, the Auditor General warned of the risk of abuse of the social relief grant to channel money away from where it was intended to go. Again, in March 2021, the Auditor General highlighted the lack of coordination and weak controls that left the relief fund vulnerable to fraud and looting. Honorable Chairperson, we need to make one thing very clear. There is no split between the government and a criminal network that infiltrated government. When you say, Honorable President, that there was state capture, you imply that it is behind us. But we are still living with its effects. That criminal network, just like those individuals who conspired to defraud government, was enabled and assisted by officials and leaders in government. Our own government became part of a criminal network. And unless we admit to this fact and stop playing semantics, the solution will evade us. Mr. President, Honorable Buthelezi has said before that raising our people's hopes and expectations is dangerous when it will be a hope deferred or an expectation unmet. What happened to the imminent appointments to the National Anti-Corruption Advisory Council? What happened to the Land and Agrarian Reform Agency that was being established last year to fast-track land reform? The National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide was announced in 2019. 3 years later, we are still talking about implementing it. And there is a trend here. Both last year and this year, Mr. President, you spoke about rolling out broadband. That policy was adopted by Cabinet 9 years ago. 8 years ago, the IFP's Honorable Dr. Mario Ambrosini, late, introduced a private member's bill to unlock the potential of the cannabis sector. 20 years ago, as Minister of Home Affairs, Prince Buthelezi drafted legislation to streamline the visa process to enable the entry of skills. But his bill was mauled by Cabinet, to say the least. Honorable Chairperson, we do not have all the time in the world. Honorable President, when you spoke last year about the Lenceria Smart City, you never mentioned that it would take 25 years to complete. When you told us about the Mokholo Crocodile River Water Project, you never explained that actual delivery is scheduled for 2026. When you said that the Student Housing Infrastructure Program would provide us 300,000 student beds, you never said over the span of 10 years. In fact, you said it was an approved project for 2021. Government must look to long-term projects. But let us not pretend that talking about tomorrow's solutions solves today's problems. Where are the solutions for today that were started yesterday? Tragically, the answer to that question is likely to become the shocking finding of yet another special investigation. Honorable President, last year you presented us with, and I quote, one of the most significant expansions of public and social employment in South Africa's history, close quote, the Presidential Employment Stimulus. Last week you told us how it had helped small-scale farmer Mama Nozipho Kekwade from Impandle in KwaZulu-Natal, and that it would now be expanded to reach 250,000 small-scale farmers this year. Yet, on 13 January 2022, the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development suspended presidential employment stimulus vouchers to all subsistence farmers with immediate effect, literally taking food off the table in many homes. Why? Because it was not being implemented properly. Honorable Chairperson, Two of the more than 8,000 words spoken last Thursday speaks volumes. These two words are properly managed. If properly managed, the energy transition will benefit all. If properly managed, the many plans and programs presented could work. But is our country being properly managed? Decades ago, Honorable Prince Buthelezi reminded government that his friend Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher fixed the economy of Britain when she sold the parastatals and slapped down the Trade Union Council Arthur Scargill. After that, UK's economy blossomed. Talking about social employment takes us back to socialism. We need to decide now whether ours will be a welfare or a developmental state. Failing to do what is needed and right has caused us far too much damage. In the past year, our national parliament has been destroyed. Our country has been shaken by massive civil unrest. Crime and unemployment have reached record highs. Our Minister of Defense and military veterans were held hostage by their own party's former military wing.
Your time is up, Honourable Member.
Thank you very much. Finally, Honourable Chairperson, when government says they love all, they must serve all. And that's what they are not doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is going to Honourable P.J. Groenewald.
Geachte Voorzitter, through you to the Honourable President, we must always remember that a President will be judged by his track record. And what I did is, I went and I looked at what the President said and what he achieved. And I want to start with his first State of the Nation address in 2018. And I quote, he said the following: "This year, we will be initiating measures to set the country on a new path of growth, employment and transformation. We will do this by getting social partners in our country to collaborate in building a social compact on which we will create drivers of economic recovery. At the center of our national agenda in 2018, it is the creation of jobs, especially for the youth." Close quote. But what is the reality? If we, for instance, go and look at the growth rate under the leadership of the President in 2018, in his first year, it decreased from 1.1% the previous year to 0.8%. In 2019, before COVID, it was 0.113%. And therefore, under his leadership and what he said, does not compare on the promises he made. If we go and look at the unemployment rate, in 2018, when he became the President, that 2018 year, under his leadership, the narrow definition was 27.1% and the broad definition 37%. At the moment, the narrow definition is 34.9% and the broader definition 46.6%. Now the President came forward and he said, and I quote, "We all know that government doesn't create jobs. Businesses create jobs." Close quote. Honourable President, yes, you're quite right. We all know that government does not create jobs. We knew it all the time. The question is, why do you say this now at this moment? You had 4 years to look at this situation. And yes, in today's weekly newsletter you said that since '94, the ANC had a mixed economy. And quite a lot of people get excited when they heard what you said. And they see it as a second new dawn. What they don't realize, they're still actually in the dark of the first dawn of 2018. And I want to say here today, Honorable President, you said this and you quoted this to use as blame shifting. The ANC government failed the people and especially the young people as far as employment is concerned. The unemployment rate amongst the youth is, and we talk about between 18 and 24 years, is about 63%. You failed them. And now you want to use this phrase as blame shifting to say, no, it's not the problem of the government. It's not because of the government, it's because of private business. If we also look what the President said, he said that he's going to establish a task team to look at the red tape. Honorable President, in 2020, you already said that. In fact, you said with the flick of the finger, you can register your company. And I can assure you, with the pandemic in 2020, many fingers had flicked to register their companies to get hold of the money with black economic empowerment and to steal the money meant for the people. That is what happened. And you don't need, of course you have to look at red tape, but if you ensure that there is good governance, then you will promote 70% of more, faster, and more willingness from the private sector to invest in South Africa. If you're in business, you have to register your employees. You go to Home Affairs now. You will stand for hours in the queues to ensure that your people get registered, to get an ID. If you improve governance, it will become better. If you go to look to your license officers, if you improve governance, you will see that there's an improvement. You also say local is lekker. Yes, of course, local is lekker. But, Honourable President, if you're so serious about local is lekker, why don't you accept a policy in your government that ministers and other officials only drive in local manufactured vehicles? If you're so serious about local is lekker, why don't you adapt and ensure that there's a policy when it comes to local government that they can only do business in their municipality and ensure that they enhance and promote the local businesses in their municipal areas? That is local is lekker. I also want to say, Honourable President, if local is lekker, why do you import Cuban engineers for millions of rand to come and do the job? But the problem is that they are not even qualified according to our standards. There are many engineers in South Africa, South African citizens, who are unemployed. In fact, many of them came forward with the ESCOM problem and said, we will work for free. We want to do it for South Africa. But you importing Cuban engineers who is not actually qualified. If local is lekker, why, for instance, then, that you take 50 million rand of taxpayers' money and you pay it for food security to Cuba? It is said that about 40% of people in South Africa is actually without food to ensure that they get a decent meal. If you're serious, start with your own people. The Freedom Front Plus will only accept that you are serious when it comes to economic reform if you amend labor legislation to ensure that unions have less power. We will only accept that if you come forward and you say you stop black economic empowerment. We will only accept if you come forward and you say you stop affirmative action. Ek wil nog 'n aanhaling maak. In 2018 sê die agbare president die volgende. Hy sê, ek wil dit nou mooi in Afrikaans sê. Ons bou 'n land waarin 'n persoon se vooruitsigte bepaal word deur sy eie inisiatief en harde werk en nie deur sy velkleur, geboorteplek, geslag, taal of inkomste van hulle ouers nie. Sluit die aanhaling. Dis wat die agbare president in 2018 sê. Maar hy gaan voort met regstellende aksie. Sy minister van hoër onderwys kom en hy wil nie eers Afrikaans as 'n inheemse taal erken nie. Maar die president het gesê almal is gelyk. Daar is nou wysigingswetsontwerpe op die tafel waar die taalbeleid van skole op die einde van die dag vir 'n finale besluit gaan berus, nie by die minister of die LER nie, by die departementshoofde in provinsies. Daar is nuwe wysigings wat selfs bepaal wat is die toelatingsbeleid vir ons skole. Ek wil vandag vir die agbare president sê, u is deel van 'n aanslag op Afrikaans. U woorde in 2018 was hol woorde. Laat ek vinnig sê in terme van die polisie en die onluste wat plaasgevind het in KwaZulu-Natal. Agbare president, die verslag sê u en die kabinet moet verantwoording neem. U moet persoonlik alleen verantwoording neem. En die rede is, in 2018 was daar die Mufamadi verslag op u tafel oor die wanorde, die korrupsie in die staatsveiligheidsagentskap. So in 2018 you already knew about the corruption in the State Security Agency. And what did you do? You did nothing. Now you first had to wait that 336 people get killed in, well, whether it was an insurrection and whether it was a riot, we still don't know. But then you started to act. If you acted in 2018, you could have prevented. Chairperson, I want also to say, I can't understand that the president says that he wants to curb violent crime in South Africa. But under his leadership, the budget for the police in 2017 or 2018, 2019 was 6% of the total budget. It has decreased now to 5% of the total budget. So you cut the budget of police, but you expect them to ensure and to fight crime. That is actions like that, where you judge the president and you ask yourself, is he really serious? You talk about gender-based violence. You've signed 3 pieces of legislation. Honorable President, the basis of gender-based violence lies with the police stations. Where a woman goes to a police station, whether there are 10 pieces of legislation, it depends on what is happening in that police station. And you will have to come down to ground level to ensure that you effectively fight gender-based violence. Honorable President, as I already said, in 2018, the headlines on the newspapers was Ramaphosa. Again, there is such a move. It is now Ramaphosa Part 2. But I want to say to you, it is going to be Rama disaster. And the only way to save South Africa is that the people vote the ANC out in 2024 and a new government exists. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Honorable G. Mikalakis.
Honourable Chairperson, the President tells us in his Sona address that there has been great progress in turning around law enforcement bodies. But even with the most rose-tinted spectacles available, this cannot be seen to be true. The President told us last year that critical leadership positions would be filled with capable, experienced and trustworthy professionals. The President acts surprised when he tells us that the revelations from the Zondo Commission of Inquiry have laid bare the extent of state capture and related corruption, and the fact that the criminal justice system has been compromised and weakened. But, Chairperson, the vast majority of this evidence was available in the public domain long before the Zondo Commission was set up. It's the very fact that this information was in the public domain that led to the Zondo Commission being set up in the first place. So this evidence or information is nothing new. Investigative journalists and public interest organizations warned us of these activities long before anyone else. Copious and detailed evidence and documentation was published by Amabungane, the Scorpio, and Daily Maverick, revealing the extent of the corruption and malaise of the upper echelons of the ANC long before the Commission was even dreamt of. During this time, President Ramaphosa was the Deputy President of South Africa, gaily chairing the Cadre Deployment Committee, enabling state capture by deploying those very cadres who have been implicated in the Zondo Commission. Those very cadres who hollowed out and decimated the criminal justice system by design. It is this committee that deployed the likes of Similane, Jiba, and the hapless Sean Abrams. It is this committee that deployed the likes of Arthur Fraser to the head of Correctional Services, despite his dismal and dishonest term of office at the State Security Agency. The President promises us last Sona, no less, that the establishment of a national anti-corruption advisory council, supposedly a multi-sectoral body that would oversee the initial implementation of the strategy and the establishment and independence of an independent statutory anti-corruption body that reports to Parliament, was imminent. Well, that did not happen. Applications were invited late last year with no discernible progress having been made. There is no credible information available to suggest that the Council has been formed or even will be formed in a foreseeable future. Despite the appointment of a very small handful of apparently capable, experienced and trustworthy professionals at the NPA, we've seen not even one successful prosecution of a high-profile corruption, money laundering and racketeering case, despite the smorgasbord of choice to pick from. Not one. The NPA is so damaged, so hollowed out, and so rudderless that no discernible progress has been reported in the past 3 years. The revelations of the Zondo Commission will produce a deluge of serious, high-profile and complex cases requiring prosecution. But thanks again to the deployment policies of the committee chaired by the President, no one can likely look forward to prosecutions following this regard anytime soon. And the ones suffering the most are the poor and the most vulnerable. Furthermore, the budget of the NPA and the police have been reduced yet again, making it impossible for them to deliver successfully complex investigations or to appoint any resources, human or otherwise, required to successfully prosecute these cases. Neither institution has the budget to procure the forensic or cyber forensic skills required to prosecute successfully. It's simply not going to happen. The President tells us he will present a plan of action in response to the recommendations made by the Zondo Commission by June 2022 and present it to this Parliament. June, honourable members. The only logical reason for this long delay must be found in the fact that the President wants to be elected as the leader of the ANC at the end of the year. Enabling the relevant authorities to put a large number of his comrades in jail will not enhance his chances, and so, true to form, he's kicking the can down the road. The President stated that he has set up mechanisms to monitor implementation of the recommendations made by the SIU in relation to corruption and fraud in the COVID-19 PPE-related contracts. Yet the SIU has largely not been paid the outstanding fees for such investigations, making this difficult and eventually impossible for it to continue to function optimally. By design, of course. The President tells us that he is expecting the investigating directorate of the NPA to deliver on its mandate. A new head of the directorate will be appointed following the departure of Advocate Grunier. It's almost 3 years into the 5-year lifespan and has not made one arrest. It has not taken one accused to court. And there is no reason to believe that this will be done so in the future. The President tells us that he will encourage engagement with the judiciary for the creation of a special courts role for state capture and corruption cases. The court rolls are already overloaded. The case backlog continues to grow on a daily basis. How is this ever going to be achieved? And even if it does, all the rape cases and murder cases of ordinary South Africans will just become part of a growing backlog and further delay justice so that we can first deal with those who abused their powers whilst the ANC was in government. Chairperson, the Democratic Alliance has, in cooperation with Accountability Now, drafted a private member's bill that will be placed before Parliament to establish an anti-corruption commission that will satisfy the strict requirements for independence as set out in the Glenister judgments, and that will enable the successful investigation and speedy prosecution of complex and high-profile corruption and state capture cases, and that will deliver tangible results proving that crime does not pay. If the President is truly serious about dealing with corruption and turning the criminal justice system around, then he and his cabinet will support this legislation. This will be his last opportunity to fulfill a promise of any nature. Chairperson, the ancient founders of the idea of democracy believed that there are 3 principles that a democratic government must always obey. Always govern according to the law, always govern in the best interest of the people, and always remember that your power will come to an end. I fear for your part that that day has come, and the Democratic Alliance and many others on these benches stand ready to take hands and build this country on these principles and those principles of our Constitution. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is going to be Honorable J.S. Mananiso.
Thank you, House Chair. I would like to start with Mr. Malema. Mr. Malema, you know the fruits of this liberation of the ANC very well. So you come here and grandstand as if you didn't benefit. You know them very well. You are the beneficiary of this liberation of the ANC. And you are not surprised, some of us, because you think you are the only president that is good. And let me tell you today, the very same community that you are speaking on behalf, they still believe that they want to be Tumamena, they still want to be activists. Honorable Chairperson, members of the EFF, let me tell you today, those who want to be Tumat, they have gathered at Wall School today to say no to racism. Honorable Oosthuizen, you must go and attend to your people at Yangfelun that today it's never the same like before. And you still say Black Lives Matters. So you must go and attend to your people. Honorable members, fellow South Africans, today we are not about what the President could have said as challenges, but our issues is to say that what needs to be done. I'm not surprised that Groenewald didn't speak about, Honorable Groenewald didn't speak about NSFAS. Because of, he is not poor. He doesn't know anything about being poor. So we're going to speak to our young people and beneficiaries that today NSFAS is better than yesterday. I'm telling them today as beneficiaries that they must know that systems that are in place today, it is because of effortless strength, potential, and human capability that we have in that board, that today the system it's easily accessed and they can use it as it when they want to. As this parliament, as this sixth administration, we have ensured that everything that our beneficiaries were crying about in terms of your appeals, in terms of waiting list and waiting for long period, or in terms of knowing their status, is being dealt with. As we speak, when you apply, you are able to follow through into the system in terms of where is your status quo. And one can tell you that the system has been improved and more needs to be done. Honorable members, let me tell you, education is a constitutional right, which individuals, groups, and institutions must never deny anyone of having. The ANC government is committed to ensure that fee-free education policy position is realized. Honorable Chair, and no one is left behind. Some of us were listening to the President when we say that we need to take everyone along. And in this year, 2022, we're going to ensure that we take everyone along. Your mandatory address is for those who understand that as citizens of South Africa, they have rights and responsibilities as stipulated in our Constitution, and they must play their part. Fellow South Africans, let me tell you about how the system has been improved. Today, nobody has to prove that he or she is a beneficiary of SASSA. The system can just speak to each other. Home Affairs, DSD, and SARS. So the system is better than yesterday. This has demonstrated that as the ANC, we are committed to ensure that everyone has access to these higher learning institutions. Today, the doors of learning and culture have been opened for the children, boys, girls, youth, women, people with disability, people with albinism, and people with LGBTIQ plus society. And one can tell you, President, that all of us, we agree that accessibility starts with information. So we have actually done that as members of parliament through our PCOs as the ANC to ensure that we take this NSFAS to the people. People have registered prior, and even during the extension, they had time to actually apply. So this year, we have been promised by the DG that no one is going to be left behind. The majority of students in higher education are women, and one can tell that there's paradigm shift. Most of the time, we knew that people would only ascend to those levels where our counterparts. But today, one can confirm that women are ascending to the foyer. Education is an apex priority of the ANC, but the proof lies in our allocation and commitment of funds for quality free education. In this space, we have emphasized issues of tirisano mmogo. President Ubule about social compact, and we would want to call to every stakeholders in this institution, your learners, your SRC, your management, your securities to work together to ensure that there's stability. President, South Africa deserves the best. We need the well-skilled human capital that is fit for purpose, because some of our institutional systems are failed by officials who do not have the prerequisite capability to implement our plans, and this impede to our service delivery. I think that's what you said last week, to say that there's a challenge, and you admit it. And one want to say to you that heads must roll, there must be consequence management. Honorable Chairperson, Public Administration Management Act, it is clear in terms of Public Financial Management Act. Code of Ethics, what needs to be done by who in terms of planning, controlling, and managing public funds for efficient and effective service delivery. Alan Soseka, what am I saying? Because the only president for you is Julius Malema. South Africans, South Africa is in a creative thinking and capable officials to create a better life for all, which will be achieved by effective, efficient, and economic service delivery by everybody. The SKA is one of the best space infrastructure that the country has ever produced, and mostly done by capable human capital that we have in the department. President, I must tell you, during our oversight, I guess some of the political parties like your EFF, they don't attend oversight. We went to an oversight where we touched and felt what is it that is done on science, innovation, and technology. And let me tell you, as South Africans, we are in a better space. Better space in a sense that some of you have just forgotten that we are the ones who have identified the variants. And the very same scientists, they were the ones at the forefront in terms of ensuring that we come with mitigation factors. Honorable President, we should repeatedly enable our science and innovation agencies to access to self-government institutions. This thing that our institutions can only be accessed by private partners. And while we have the CSIR that is capable, it is totally wrong. We must make sure those who are science and technology and innovation space, they are able to create opportunities within their spaces. There should be preferred service providers to stimulate local innovation development for commercialized growth. Okay, thank you. Today it's better than yesterday.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is going to be virtual, and is Honorable B.H. Olomisa. Honorable Olomisa.
Person, Mr. President and honorable members. Mr. President, the United Democratic Movement thanks you for heeding our call to have the corruption at PIC investigated. One would, however, like to know when the monies are going to be recouped as recommended by Judge Mpati Commission. The evidence leaders and forensic auditors who assisted the Commission could assist SIU and NPA. This could also apply to Zondo Commission. We submit that such a process would speed up the prosecution. There is no need to start from scratch. Also, the money that was invested abroad by Harris Tsepo Mashwele and Jabu Muleketi's company could be traced with the assistance of organizations like FBI. Without preempting the final outcome of the Zondo Commission, the same goes for the monies that were confirmed at the Zondo Commission and Mpati Commission as well. That is the VPS, SSA, and Bosasa scandals were diverted to your party's coffers. When will that money be returned to the fiscus to fix roads and many other infrastructure and other projects? Evidence corner, you have nothing to lose. Faguswas, I was fortunate to work with you and others at the time when we labored towards the new South Africa. In the end, we succeeded in bringing about a new dispensation. There was and still is a legitimate expectation from South Africans, especially blacks, that they would, in the end, reap the rewards from the sweat and tears they shared. Progress, yes, was made in certain areas. It remained that we enjoyed political freedom. However, the fervoots of this world must be laughing as the erstwhile liberators have transformed into power and money-hungry hyenas who have ravaged the public purse, bankrupting the country. The other issue we are asking you to look at, Mr. President, is provident funds of mine workers and other private companies. What hurts is when the so-called hardline socialists through unions using investment companies and provident funds access workers' monies to lavishly line their own pockets, whilst workers and their families languish in poverty. They die paupers and their families are left to rot. In July 2021 mayhem that broke out in Gauteng and KwaZulu-Natal exposed the weaknesses in the state of readiness of our law enforcement agencies. The other weakness it exposed is that the current model of civil oversight is not working. Law enforcement and military professionals must head these institutions, and civilian oversight can rest with the office of the minister and in parliament. Masikhulume nge-operation ethi mongameli. Malibuye ilizwe lethu emaseleni malibuye. Regarding the consensus on the economy, Mr. President, the UDM believes you are wasting your time with NETLEC. As it is constituted since 1994 by its act, it has been a failure. The tensions that have existed has deterred progress for years. If you want tangible change, the answer, as the UDM has been advocating for some time, is hosting an economic indaba on the same scale as CODESA. Piecemeal conferences and summits will not do the job. It needs a concerted effort with all stakeholders gathering under one roof to hammer out South Africa's economic policies. The economic indaba should emerge with consensus, after which its decisions should directly go to Parliament for ratification and implementation. In this concerted manner, we are more likely to achieve policy certainty that will in turn ensure economic transformation and inclusive growth. Bamba lamasela isho uNPA wabambe asijikile indlela zisebenzi ngapha emakhaya yabo coffee bay ubangatshona ngapha nakule lento lemvula ibisanda bakhona sawuke sithini kanti ufuna sithini sinikenge sithini opposition parties kuyafuneka ke ziphunga ikofi sikhangela uba the tripartite alliance
The time is up.
Sikwazi uba ngo-2024 size nenye alliance strong. Basibuyele ixesha aba bantu.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is going to be Honorable Viz Zungula.
Thank you, Chairperson. Mr. President, in your last Sona, we have basically thrown in the towel and given up on the state governing the country. We have effectively privatized the country. Our SOEs are effectively privatized. The functions of ministries and departments have been handed over to the private sector. You have commissions of inquiries, panels, advisors, task teams for work that should be done by the government. You analyze the country's problems. You speak as if you are an economist or an analyst. You lack decisive leadership to resolve the country's problems. Yet, you want people to have confidence in your leadership. You have centralized power in the presidency. However, there is no tangible results from your centralization. You have even privatized investigations and the prosecution of crimes. This is an admission that you don't have confidence in your own government and your own self as president. You speak about providing land available for private investors, yet you said nothing about providing land for the dispossessed majority of our people who need land. You deliberately destroy SOEs so you can sell them to your friends at a very cheap price. In fact, you are building your own private business empire, because after you are done with this side gig of yours, of being president of the country, you will go back to business and enjoy the wealth you have accumulated whilst being the president. You say you are a governing party, kodwa niphethwe. NGOs are governing you. Even with the appointment of the Chief Justice, you want to ignore the recommendations of the political parties and the JSC and appoint a Helen Suzman and a freedom under law preferred candidate. You speak about critical skills for skills we supposedly do not have as a country. You even prioritize e-visas. You have no plan on training and capacitating South Africans to have these skills. Basically, you want South Africans to be always dependent on external skills. You have destroyed the textile industry, which created a lot of jobs for citizens. By opening up the country for cheap products from China, you are basically doing the same thing now by destroying the local job market. Syndicates have destroyed the rail system, which services millions of workers. When confronted with the same problem in Kenya, President Kenyatta showed decisive leadership by banning the sale of scrap metals, where in South Africa, awenzi fokol. You said nothing about the hate crimes against black people in Phoenix and Gqeberha. The events of Gqeberha in Phoenix show the extent of the national security crisis we are in, yet awenzi kwanto. The country is a human trafficking, drug trafficking, forced prosecution capital in the continent, and this does not bother you. A true leader, a true president would have built capacity and confidence in the state and its institutions. A true leader would have listened to the cries of poor citizens who want to be prioritized in their own country. Instead, when you want to open up the country more and displace more citizens from the economy, a true leader would have prioritized youth unemployment and found sustainable ways to empower young people. Instead, your silence on youth issues has condemned young people to hopelessness. A true leader would have a drive to reopen all of the factories across the country and revive the manufacturing, and South Africa becomes a self-sustainable country. A true leader would have prioritized the reducing of the high unemployment levels in our country through fundamental and systematic changes to our economy by nationalizing the Reserve Bank, land expropriation without compensation, and the local production of basic goods. A true leader would have issued an executive order that more than 50% of the government budget must be spent on SMMEs, as they are known to be the biggest creators of jobs, but you don't do that. Last Thursday, you practically begged parties in parliament to relieve you from this position because you don't have confidence in yourself and your government. Sizohlangana kwi-vote of no confidence.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is going to be Honorable S. Mahube.
Chairperson, perhaps one of the greatest tragedies of South Africa's maturing democracy is its lame duck national legislature. Parliament as an institution has been systemically hollowed out long before a fire gutted its roof. We have members of Parliament who neither appreciate nor understand the gravity of the oath that they took. For decades, Parliament has effectively failed to truly represent the people of South Africa who have sent us here. And so on Thursday, while the President spoke at length about the country's biggest challenges, it became apparent that Parliament has become a lapdog and not a watchdog on behalf of the people of South Africa. In a functional parliamentary democracy, members of the executive would know that this institution is designed to hold them accountable and not shield them from scrutiny. However, it is a known and fast becoming accepted fact that the ANC will use majority in this House to block measures to hold ministers to account and attempts to make this House effective. It suits an ineffective and corrupt government to have a legislature that is a mere extension of itself and not the institution to which they account. If one reads the State Capture Commission reports, you soon realize that Parliament has aided and abetted the theft of public money through its inaction. In fact, there should have never been a reason for a commission of inquiry had we had a functioning Parliament. However, committees which were empowered to demand answers from the executive and begin the work of rooting out the tentacles of corruption in our country sat idly while state looters ran amok. While the rules of Parliament empower us to subpoena witnesses, make recommendations, change budgets, this House did nothing. It became a do-nothing parliament, a place where inept and unsuitable ministers and heads of state could find refuge and not answer for their failures. The same thing became evident at the height of COVID-19 pandemic, where billions were looted and this House once again did nothing. In fact, it was the DA that called for the very first debate of public importance on the state of readiness of South Africa and our health system before the first cases were detected. We did so because we understood the assignment. We did so because we understood the gravity of the work that is being done here. While in the throes of the worst pandemic in recent history, key members of the ANC saw it as an opportunity to steal and rob us blind, many of who sit here today expecting to be called honorable members when in fact there's very little honorable about them. When the former Minister of Health, Dr. Mkhize, was allegedly part of the 150 million rand cash heist meant for the people of South Africa, we made calls to summon him before the Health Committee, and those efforts were blocked by ANC members of Parliament. The National Legislature's role is not only to consider reports on the theft of public money, but we have to in fact use the mechanisms available to us to prevent corruption from happening. In a country that has one of the highest unemployment rates, where 7 out of 10 young people are unemployed and cannot find work, this House should be doing better. It is telling to us that Parliament has never once amended or sent back a budget. Malunga eParlamente umsebenzi wethu ukuthini xa singenoqinisekisa into yoba imithetho exalushwa apha yaseMzantsi Afrika ixhasa abo basonyuleyo. Kutheni singenokwazi ubeka ezepolitiki bucala xa kumele sisebenzele abantu beli? Ingaba la malunga aseParlamente azilibele na uba bazothini okanye bazokwenza ntoni na apha? Ukuba benizimisela ukusebenzela abantu beli ngeba zange kwabiwa imali ngendlela yabiwa ngayo under state capture okanye COVID corruption. But it does not have to be this way. It truly does not have to be this way. We can revive the powers of this House. There are only 4 things that Parliament is empowered to do. The one is to elect a president. It is to pass legislation. It is to hold the executive to account and become a platform for public debate. This House continues to fail on most of these things because of the ANC. We urgently need to change the culture of doing business in Parliament, and we can do so by doing the following thing. We can begin to get back to work and get back to work in earnest. If we expect South Africans to go back to work, we must go back to work. We need to uphold the doctrine of separation of powers. Members of Parliament are not elected to be relegated praise singers for members of the executive. We are a legislative arm and we must act like it. Parliamentary questions are not an exercise in mindless verbosity by some members of the executive. We must pose questions that are uncomfortable without the ANC pledging their support put to Luthuli House by shielding ministers to account. Parliament should be intolerant of ministers like Begitsele, ministers like Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma and Pravin Gordhan, who are serial offenders of unanswered parliamentary questions. This House, honorable members, is not a place of comfort where your mediocrity can find a home. Committees and Parliament should be the engine room for passing quality legislation and demanding more from ministers. We should follow international best practice and elect opposition chairpersons. If we are to rescue South Africa and change lives, then we need to get Parliament working again. We cannot come here every single year and listen to the same State of the Nation address while Parliament is in disarray. It is deeply unfortunate that the President's commitment to fighting corruption on Thursday is virtually meaningless.
Instead of removing implicated ministers like Kumbutso Njaveni, Zizi Kodwa, Gwede Mantashe, he opts to create a parallel cabinet of advisors and chairs of many a task team. What is very clear, members, is that ours is a president incapable of making difficult but necessary decisions. He is incapable of putting country before party, and that is why we need a strong legislature now more than ever. While the compromise will be accepted and promoted under the Ramaphosa administration, that kind of behavior cannot be tolerated in this House. We are accountable to the people of South Africa. Ours is a service to country first. We need to take that responsibility seriously. And this service goes far beyond party lines. It's time to get to work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we'll call upon the Deputy Minister of Finance, David Masomba.
Minister Ngungubele, Honorable Ngungubele, I'm going to defy your advice. I'm not going to follow your advice, which is that I must not be diverted. I'm going to be diverted. I'm going to divert a little bit, particularly on the distortion and falsification of what the President of the Republic said on the relationship between the state and business. The point here is that the ANC seeks to build a developmental state. And the developmental state is not meant to obliterate the private sector. That's the first thing we need to accept. Instead, it is meant to work with the private sector in order to drive the process of development. It's about catching up. It's about catching up with the developed world. And all late developers, South Korea, including the US, they always face about 5 obstacles for them to carry out development. The first one is the market, access to the market. And the way those developmental states work, they work with the private sector, either to protect their own markets or to enter other global markets. Number 2, in the process of doing that, the private sector invests and it creates jobs. Number 2, the second obstacle is finance, which private sector may not sufficiently provide finance for the new entrants into the market. And it's for that reason that the state works with the private sector in order to enable the private sector to invest and grow and develop our economy. The third obstacle is also technology. The state works with the private sector in order to assist the private sector to embark on technology, because it's through that technology that they can also become globally competitive. Skills, it's another area. And lastly, network industries, particularly SOEs, which provide services insofar as these issues are concerned. And the way we differ with other parties who have become self-appointed spokesperson of the president is that we don't believe that the market itself on its own can solve the problems of underdevelopment, but it's a combination of the state and working with the market to basically realize that. And precisely because we are dealing with the legacy of settler colonialism, the state has to assist the historically excluded to also participate in business. through different interventions in that regard. Failure to do so, failure to implement BEE affirmative action will be nothing else but to protect colonially accumulated privileges. And the only way that we will achieve a fundamental shift in our growth trajectory is by transforming the structure of the economy. Operation Vulindlela was established as a joint initiative of the Presidency and National Treasury in October 2020 in pursuit of this imperative. Its aim is to support departments and entities to accelerate the implementation of reforms that will unlock growth and create jobs. There's intensive work underway across government on this reform agenda, which has already shown significant progress. Each of the commitments which the President made in the 2021 Sona has been met. The President committed to raising the licensing threshold for self-energy generation to unlock new capacity. In June last year, we raised the threshold from 1 megawatt to 100 megawatts. The President said we should complete digital migration by the end of March 2020 and proceed with the auction of high-demand spectrum. We are on track on this milestone. The President committed to revive the blue drop, green drop, no drop monitoring system to improve the quality of our water supply. The system has been reinstated. And the first reports will be published in the next month. The President spoke about repositioning the ports of Durban and Ngqura, shifting freight cargo from road to rail. Transnet will have partnerships in place at both airports in October this year. Our government will soon take the first steps towards enabling the third-party access to the freight rail network. The President said we should roll out an e-visa system to grow the tourism industry. The e-visa is now live for 14 countries. These are concrete examples of progress of a government that is following through on its commitment. Anyone who claims that the reform agenda is not moving clearly is not paying attention. It's important to reflect on why we are implementing these reforms and what difference they will make to the lives of all South Africans. In the next few years, energy reforms will mean that there is competition in electricity generation with adequate supply to meet demand. This will end load shedding. The independent grid operator will buy electricity at the lowest price from Eskom and private generators. In the next few years to come, a world-class freight logistics would have been established. This will mean more jobs in export industries to support our companies that are exporting. It will also mean lower costs for all the goods that we buy and less congestion on our highways. The release of the spectrum will obviously reduce data costs, increase broadband speed and quality, and expand network reach across the country, including deep rural areas. Stronger institutions in the water sector will mean better maintenance of our water infrastructure, fewer disruption to water supply, and long-term water security in the face of climate change. The reforms to the visa system will ensure that we get access, skills, as well as resources that our economy needs while protecting and increasing employment of South Africans, especially in low-skilled and semi-skilled work. Access to productive assets such as land and housing enable the poor to engage in productive economic activities. And again, this is where we paid company with some of our colleagues here that we don't believe in growth first and it will naturally trickle down. We believe in growth with redistribution because the two must take place simultaneously. Honorable Chairperson, title deeds will enable the asset owners to secure access to finance for other productive activities. This year, the government will be prioritizing the issuing of title deeds for subsidized housing as part of the key reforms to release economic growth with redistribution. The housing subsidy program is one of the most direct redistributive programs, transferring assets from the state to low-income households. However, the potential of many of these properties is not realized because of a complex and inaccessible system of issuing title deeds. As part of our structural reform agenda, we have established an interdepartmental task team to expedite the issuing of title deeds for subsidized housing and clear the current backlog. We are also implementing several reforms this year that will unlock new investment in infrastructure by the private sector. The process to amend Regulation 28 of the Pension Fund Act to enable retirement funds to invest in infrastructure has been completed, and the Minister of Finance will gazette the amended regulation later this month. These amendments introduce more effective maximum limits for the trustees of retirement funds to invest for the long term in various forms of infrastructure projects. The National Treasury has completed a review of the private-public partnership PPP regulatory framework to improve the pace at which PPP's projects are planned and to address regulatory challenges. This will allow greater private sector participation and crowd in high levels of investment. Our reform agenda is at the heart of a new consensus, a consensus that pairs structural reforms with expanded social protection and redistribution to confront the challenges we face. Through this new consensus, we will build a dynamic economy and a society in which all can live with dignity. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Order, honorable members. We will now have a comfort break for 30 minutes, and refreshments for members will be served at the following venues: David Bloomberg reception area, which is located at the back of the chamber. David Bloomberg reception area, which is located at the back of the chamber. The Robin Room on the second floor. The cigar room, which is also on the second floor. Members will be ushered to these venues by parliamentary staff, and bells will be rung 10 minutes before the resumption of the debate, which debate will be chaired by the Deputy Speaker. The House is now adjourned for 30 minutes.
Recording stopped.